on this super live unboxing. A little bit of awkwardness there, but we're going to take a look at a couple of different IEMs. So it's a Sunday evening. I just got done with a very tiring bicycle ride, and while I've got a little bit of energy in me, I think I'm going to be pretty spent tomorrow, but while I've still got a little bit of energy in me, I wanted to take a look at this IEM, the FH3, kind of cap off the weekend, as well as another one. We've got the Audiosense AQ7. So a couple of in-ear monitors that on the surface don't have a ton in common, but you dig in, there is actually something in common, and it doesn't actually matter that there's a ton in common, but because I have them in the same video, I'm going to tell you about them. So we'll start with the FH3. This is a hybrid in-ear monitor. From Fiio, it's kind of their latest thing. I think it costs around $130. It's not super cheap, but also still, I think, pretty much in the upper budget sort of price range. It is, I think I mentioned, it's a hybrid IEM. It's got a single dynamic driver as well as two balanced armatures, and those two balanced armatures are from Knowles, if it matters. You kind of expect that in these more expensive IEMs. But maybe also what's interesting about that dynamic driver that they have in there, a couple of things. So one, it's a 10mm dynamic driver. Kind of large for an IEM, not especially, well, it's a little bit large for an IEM, frankly. But the other thing is that it is beryllium coated. Now we go over here to the Audiosense AQ7, and likewise, this is a hybrid IEM. But unlike the Fiio, the Audiosense is, well, I'll just say that Audiosense is pitching this as their flagship IEM. This is not quite budget. This is about a $500 IEM. And for that $500, what do you get? Well, you get a bunch of balanced armatures. Each ear has 7 drivers. So that's 6 balanced armatures plus 1 dynamic driver. And like the Fiio, the dynamic driver that you get in here is a 10mm driver. Unlike the Fiio driver, however, the dynamic in here is actually titanium coated, not beryllium. Does that matter? I don't know. I mean, we're gonna find out. So just full disclosure, in this video, I'm just gonna unbox these things and give you some first impressions of the physical aspects. I'll give them a little fit test, but I'm not gonna give them an audio, like a sound review. I'm gonna spend some time living with both of these IEMs, and I'll come back probably in a week or two, maybe a couple weeks, and let you know what I think. But for now, let's go ahead and see what's in the box, and we'll start with whichever one spins best. Let's start with the Fiio. All right, so I'll do a quick tour of this box. I don't think there's a ton to learn. In fact, yeah, there is not a ton to learn. A little bit of information down here on the bottom. Like I mentioned, it's a 2BA, 1 dynamic driver hybrid earphone, but, well, and there's your Knowles logo if you're an aficionado for Knowles. But other than that, not a ton here. We do have our high-res sticker, and you know that means the world to me. That's a joke, it doesn't. But let's go ahead and see what's inside this box. Oh, we got magnets. I gotta love magnets. Pretty hefty documentation up front. Let's do this documentation justice and flip through it and pretend like we're reading it, just like we do with any other manual. All right, that's how you connect them. That is not very complicated, but I suppose if this is your first IEM, maybe this kind of information is useful. Frankly, for me, not my first IEM. So, ooh, there's the buds already kind of nicely laid out there, but like usual, I'm gonna tease you and I'm gonna go for the boring stuff. Let's go ahead and, oh my gosh, can I get to the boring stuff? That's thick. Maybe that's not so boring. I'm gonna pull this out here just so we have it here. That is a thick box. So maybe this boring stuff is not quite so boring after all, but let's go ahead and start with the boring stuff anyway. So like some other Fios, this comes with a little sort of mini Pelican case, which I think is pretty cool. Frankly, I don't use these, but I don't know. I can see how they would be useful to someone who's, you know, only toting around 1 IEM. For me, these things are just a little bit on the large side, but it is nice that they also include this smaller case, which is probably a little bit more practical. Now, whether or not the FH3 will actually fit into this, I'm not sure, but it's kind of nice. And here they give you a little brush of sorts. These little brushes can be good for cleaning out the ears, the in-ear tubes, which anytime you're sticking things in your ears, it's a thing you don't want to really think about a lot, but your ears are gross. My ears are gross. They're gonna get gross stuff and you want to clean them. All right, let's see what we got in here. It looks like we've got a fair selection of tips. And we are gonna unbox all of them so we can take a look. This is interesting. Did they include 4 different types of tips? Am I gonna have to test 4 different types of tips? Spoiler, I'm probably not gonna test 4 different types of tips. But we'll see what we got inside. And this is gonna be the longest tip unfurling on Super Review. I apologize for that, so I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. But man, look at all these tips. Fiio. It's a little nuts, but you know, this is nuts for someone like me who I have a ton of tips from other earphones that I've got, and maybe you don't, so it's nice to have this collection. So it looks like they sent 2 different pairs of foam tips. They both appear to be the same size. These are kind of like roughly a size large in foams. They've got these tips, which, let's see if we can compare them. Do a little nozzle size, or not nozzle size, bore size comparison between these 3 tips. So these are your 3 silicone sizes, and it looks like it is kind of a progression, right? Where the black ones appear to be the narrowest bore, the red ones somewhere in between, and then this last one seems to be the widest bore. And typically, if you haven't done a lot of experimenting with tips, you can actually somewhat affect the frequency response of your earphone by swapping out tips. The effect is usually on the mild side, but you know, it has an effect. So if there's an earphone that maybe you like, but maybe it doesn't have quite enough bass for you, going for a smaller bore tip can kind of cut out a little bit of the high frequency, which will have the effect of boosting your perception of the low frequency. Ooh, I didn't do that quite right, but that's an interesting effect we will go with. Sorry for this elongated tip unfurling, but there you go. That is a lot of tips for a $130 earphone, but what you're actually interested in is the earphone here, so let's go ahead and pull it out. And it looks like there's even another set of tips pre-installed on the FH3, which is, they're just throwing tips at you. Fiio wraps their cable in this nice little Velcro zip, which is nice. I collect these things, and I have my own little collection of IEM Velcro zip ties. One of these days I'm going to show it, but we'll put that aside. And actually pretty interesting is that the FH3 comes with this Fiio cable. I actually have this Fiio cable. I bought one separately just because I like the look of it, and I do actually quite like this cable. I think this is one of the nicer built cables out there, especially for a free IEM cable. It's just nice and heavy duty, and for Fiio to include this in their $130 offering, I think that's pretty nice. And let's take a look at the buds real quick. These shells don't seem to share a ton in common with other Fiio IEMs that I've got, although this sort of outer pattern is similar to the FH5, which I do have. Take a look at the nozzle real quick, and you have sort of a mesh covering on it. But yeah, I don't know, that is the FH3. Interestingly, okay, there is a little bit of a lip on there to hold your tips in place, but it's a bit of a mild lip. Let's see, it does seem to be plenty secure. Like, I don't think this thing's gonna fall off in my ear, but maybe worth calling out. So that is the Fiio FH3. I'll do a quick fit test. And initial impression is that's quite a nice fit. Does it look beautiful in my ear? Isolation seems roughly average, but pretty strong. Fit seems pretty nice. Nozzles are a little bit on the long side, but not too long. And there is a little bit of squishing going on as I push this in my ear, and it could be because I just went for a bicycle ride earlier today and I'm a little sweaty and a little gross, or it could be little bit of driver flex. That's the sort of thing I'm gonna look out for in the full review, but there you go. That is the Fiio FH3. Pretty nice looking IEM for 130 bucks. Build quality wise, like these buds, I'm just gonna show them to you again on the table. Quality wise, these are actually pretty standout for the price, frankly. I think that these things, you know, they're kind of up against something like, let's say the Moondrop Starfield. You got the Etymotic ER2XR, which always makes me sound like a robot when I say it. What else in this price range? Tin Hi-Fi T4. So, you know, those sorts of things. And I think just in terms of build quality, I would give this the immediate advantage over all three of these. This thing feels really nice. Combination of really nice, solid feeling buds with, I think, a nice aesthetic, a nice little matte finish to it. But also just this cable, which I'm a big fan of this cable. It's not necessarily the most well-behaved, as you can kind of see here. It's a little bit on the stiff side, but there is a quality to it that I appreciate. But that is one IEM down. Let's go ahead and quickly pull all this aside so we can pull in the Audiosense AQ7 as our second unboxing, our second featured item. So like I mentioned, this is a much more expensive IEM. Audiosense, they're calling this their flagship, $500 IEM. And for 500 bucks, what do you get? Well, let's go around the box. They do call out the Knowles balanced armature drivers here, as I mentioned. They've got this red Insight badge. I'm not too familiar with what that means. Then down here on the bottom, again, like I described, 6 BAs, 1 dynamic driver. There's, again, kind of like Fiio, they're not giving us a ton of information here, but let's see. Audiosense, that just says Audiosense a couple of times. And the words hello. So, not a lot to learn from the box. Let's just go ahead and crack it open. Do we got more magnets? Oh, more magnets. You guys. And we got the IEM sitting in, yet again, another Pelican type box. This one very much larger, but we'll put you aside for now because we do have some paperwork to very briefly look at. I won't torture you too long. We got a few stats here on this card, which maybe we can take a look at. Sensitivity rating of 110 decibels. I'm guessing if that's the typical dB rating scale, that's actually that's a pretty sensitive IEM, and ostensibly this thing will get pretty loud on most sources. It might also show hiss, so that's a thing that we'll kind of figure out when we get into the review. Oh, look at this. There's English. I can just go ahead and stick with that. Frequency response of 5 to 22,000 hertz, pretty typical, although 5 hertz is a little bit lower than you typically see claimed. Not that I can hear that. I've definitely tested my hearing, and about 20 hertz is about the limit of my lower hearing. 13 ohm impedance, so again, pretty sensitive as an IEM. And then this other paperwork, well, this is a manual. I'm gonna spend not too much time in. Wait, did that say something about burning in? About the burning. All right, if you are a burn-in fan, Audiosense has got you covered. I'm not sure I believe in burn-in, but Audiosense has got the science, so who am I to argue? All right, so here we got this little case with another hello, and a little bit more text. I'm not gonna read that, partly because I can't read it, but take a look at this case. Yeah, this is a little bit, I think, too large in my opinion to be useful. Maybe useful is like for storing accessories and stuff like that, but I'm not gonna carry around a case this large. I'm kind of curious if you might. It's got this little rubber basket sitting inside, so if you do have things inside there, they're gonna bounce around and not hit the hard plastic, which is nice, but still a little bit too large in my opinion. Put the buds over here for a second and take a look at the boring stuff. Ooh, we got a lot of boring stuff, as you might expect for a $500 IEM. So like the Fiio, the Audiosense comes with a toothbrush, some pretty big gaps, but probably still pretty effective. Like, cleaning your teeth or cleaning out the gunk from your IEMs. Let's see, let's take a look at, well, I'll take a look at that cable later. Like the Fiio, looks like Audiosense has supplied a plethora of ear tips. I like the word plethora, I don't get to use that very often. What is your favorite word? It looks like the ear tips are similarly to the Fiio color-coded, and there's probably some literature in here that will tell me what the different effects of them are, but probably what I'll do is I'll find the IM with the widest, or the tip with the widest bore, and I'll stick with that. So, just like the Fiio, the Audiosense comes with a set of foam tips, and these seem to be exactly the same tips as the Fiio came with. Except they give you more. They give you extra. That's what you get for your extra $350. Now let's take a look at let's lay these things out and see what these different tips look like. So these ones are interesting. Those are kind of this rubber is almost like, it kind of reminds me of Final E-type tips. It's thinner, but it's got a very similar sheen to it. And a similar tacky texture. That appears to be sort of the assortment here. So these tacky ones are a little bit on the short side, you can kind of see, versus something like this, which is a little bit taller. They do also appear to be, bore size seems roughly the same between these. So mostly it seems like Audiosense is trying to tailor the fit. Lay these things out like I typically do. Not the most fun parts of my videos, but you do get to see how many tips they've included. And this is actually borderline ridiculous. Not complaining, but man, that's a lot of tips. Yeah, these ones are interesting. I've never seen, apart from Final, a company ship tips that have this sort of tacky quality to them. Maybe JVC spiral dots, or special spiral dots that they sent with the FDX1. They're kind of similar. Ooh, add this to my collection of zip ties. And this cable. So interestingly, this cable appears to be the exact same cable that came with the Audiosense, what was it? DT200, I believe. Now the DT200 was a much cheaper IM. I think it was around $150, maybe $160, something in that range. A 2-balanced armature IM, not their flagship, but curiously they have sent the same cable. And if I'm honest, this is not my favorite cable. It's still an MMCX cable, kind of like the last one that just came with the Fiio. And up here, I think I mentioned when I unboxed the DT200 that these sheaths around the ear hooks kind of reminded me of the Fiio. But the thing I don't really like about these cables, this is maybe just an aesthetic thing, but down here at the bottom, there's no like hardware to, I don't know, streamline this joint. So it just kind of looks like you've got the cable stuffed into straws. Just my personal opinion. Let's go back to the Fiio just for comparison's sake. And I think this is just a nicer look. What do you think? All right, enough complaining about this cable. I mean, there's some nice things about this cable, right? It's plenty soft. It's got a little bit of kinkiness to it right now, but it just came out of a box. I think that will wear out. And then this Y-split, I think, is actually a pretty nice Y-split because it's got a chin slider built in, which if you're a fan of chin sliders, that's great. And this is actually a very functional chin slider. You can kind of see that I'm gonna flick it and it's not gonna move itself out of place. So very functional. But if you're not a fan of chin sliders, I like the way this one is designed because it just kind of tucks away and it actually looks like you don't have a chin slider at all. Pretty slick. So let's go ahead and wind up this cable and then finally take a look at the earbuds of the AQ7. That is where the magic happens. Magic does not happen in a cable. Don't believe the hype. Here, however, with these little IEMs, interesting aesthetic, huh? Let's go ahead and push these things out of this foam block, and right away one thing is standing out. And maybe this shouldn't be a surprise. This is a 7-driver IEM, and again, that's 6 balanced armatures per earbud, as well as a not insubstantial 10mm dynamic driver. This is a pretty chonky IEM. I mean, we'll see how it fits in my ear, but just like thickness-wise, depth-wise, that's a bit chonky. What do you think? Aesthetically, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty nice looking, but I don't know that this totally looks like a $500 IEM. Maybe I'm just being picky. It's got kind of this like fiberglass look on the outside, which is unique. I haven't seen anything like this, so that's cool. I like the Audiosense logo over here. I think it's a nice looking abbreviated version of their logo. Over here on the right side where it actually spells out the word Audiosense in this kind of aggressive italic font. Not the biggest fan of that, but I don't know. Does that really matter? Interestingly, up here at the top, in addition to your MMCX connector, it does look like it's got some venting. That's actually kind of interesting. That's curious. I mean, you expect some venting because it is a dynamic driver and you do need somewhere for that air to go. But curious to see if covering that up like has any effect on the sound. And then here in the nozzle, you do, again, like the Fiio, have a little mesh covering, and like the Fiio, you've got a fairly mild lip on it. This nozzle looks a little bit longer than the Fiio, and let's see, I'm gonna just kind of blind pick which tips I think I will like. I tend to like these sort of like rounded shaped ones, so we'll go with that. And then we'll throw this thing on the cable and give it a quick fit test. In case it wasn't clear, so the Fiio actually came on the cable. It is also an MMCX connector, just to clarify. But yeah, that is the Audiosense AQ7. Let's go ahead and throw it in my ears. And again, this is a chonky DNTR. I see you saying chonkers. I agree, quite chonker. Comfort-wise, it's not bad. It doesn't fit me as well as the Fios, though. In fact, over here on the right side, let's see what's going on with that. I mean, the chonkiness is actually not too big of an issue. It's just not as molded as the Fiio. The Fio's got a little bit more of a smooth molding on the interior, whereas the shape here on the AQ7 is fairly blunt. But I think, yeah, comfort-wise, I don't think this is going to be an issue. You know, something like the Moondrop Blessing 2, that is a chonker IEM as well, in a different sense though. It's more the way that it kind of like spreads itself out and fills out the inside of my ear, whereas this one is more just about that thickness, and it's not so much about how much it fills out my inner ear. So comfort-wise, I think it'll be fine. Fit-wise, this immediately doesn't fit as well as the Fiio. Does that matter? What really matters is what this thing sounds like, and unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about what either of these IEMs sound like right now. So I don't know. That's going to be the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. Enjoy the rest of the week. If you've got any questions about either of these IEMs, please join my Discord channel and we can have a little conversation, and I'll drop a few notes about them before the review goes up. And again, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to answer those sort of questions as they come up. But yeah, that is the Fiio FH3 and the Audiosense AQ7. If you're interested in checking these things out, I do have links in the description down below. And if you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ding the bell so you're a part of the next live stream, and I'll see you on the next Super Review.